Sanusha, yesterday when I spoke to you ahead of this electoral race, we were speaking about race as one of the key issues in this leadership battle. Provincial leader Bongi Nkosi Madikizela saying there that race in the DA, as far as the DA is concerned, is a non-issue, and that we should, instead of race, be focusing on the issues that affect the people of South Africa. That's all very well on the surface, but how does race play into the leadership of the DA and the voter base?
Good afternoon. Yes, indeed. I think you're right in the context of what we're seeing now. The optics is something that you can't ignore with regard to this party. And if you're thinking about optics and you're thinking about how optics play, it's quite interesting to see that what the party has done is elected a leader that they feel would stabilize the party and grow the party forward. But unfortunately, that leader has the issue of race comes into play. So there's actually an interesting dynamic between a white male versus a African female. And in that context as well, as much as you want to shy away from it and you want to say we want to transition ourselves in South Africa to a kind of post-race debate or a post-race society, is very difficult to do because at the heart of everything, even the land policy that the DA had proposed and Mr. Steenhuisen, now the leader of the DA, had put forward and was seconded, it comes back to race. It's an intergenerational issue of inequality and dispossession. So I think at the end of the day, the optics of race and the question of race is something that is not just a South African exceptionalism, but around the world. We are dealing with the question of race in terms of how it's coming forward, in whose identity, whose lives matter, how you actually incorporate those dynamics, and are we at that point where we can look at a post-race society in South Africa? And I think in the world alone we can't. So I think there's a very interesting way in which we want to look at this. And I think the optics of what happened in the DA was something that everybody had predicted. And I think it's not something that surprises us. But again, it tells you what makes the party think that they can stabilize and move forward in the context of who's the current leader of the DA now.
Leadership aside, we've also got to look at who the DA has been chasing in terms of votes. We know that in the last election they lost a number of votes to the Freedom Front Plus. They also seemingly lost a number of votes back to the ANC. The Freedom Front Plus votes that they lost, they have been chasing those voters with the kind of policy they've implemented. However, seemingly the black votes they have not been chasing because their policy against BBEE, broad-based black economic empowerment, they haven't supported that. What does that say about where the party needs to go to win back a diverse number of votes?
I agree. I mean, I think the point is that what are you going to stabilize towards, and what are you going to grow towards? I think you're right. Stabilization does also mean growth, but then who are you trying to get back into the party and where are you trying to grow the party is fundamental to not just the DA, but to any political party that has suffered severely in any election. And I think in this context, is it about the traditional support base to just stabilize for the next election as a kind of short-term approach in the context of the party's electoral footprint, stabilize, make sure we don't lose any more votes or actually decline any further than from 2019, and then looking at what the performance was in 2016, and then hoping that you kind of maintain some level of stability, and then see how you move forward. The big disruptor in all of this, Anani, is the fact that you have a growing number of the South African demographic profile is where you need to place your electoral campaign is in the age group of under 35. And that, I think, is not just a challenge for the DA, but it's going to be a real challenge for them because at this point in time, they're not talking the talk of what that group of people want. And that's where you have to think about a South Africa moving forward in 2024 and what your growth projection should be in terms of how do you align your political, your identity, as well as your policy towards it. And this group becomes very susceptible to the likes of the EFF, to the likes of a party that may talk to their dispossession, their vulnerability, and, of course, their marginalization. And they are a party. I mean, they are a group of people that don't have much to lose because they don't have that loyalty as before to the ANC or whatever. And then you have the Freedom Front Plus, where in that group as well, people will return to a traditional base. So I think that's a big challenge for the party going forward.
Sanusha, what do you see in the future of Mbali and Ntuli within the DA? The party hasn't been too kind to its runners-up in the past.
Well, let's assume that she's going to stick with the party. She said she's going to stick with the party. Let's assume that maybe that this was not the election that she was going to win, but maybe they're going to groom her for the next election. But again, things are so fluid in the political landscape of South Africa and in our political and our electoral landscape that I think the question remains is how will she work with a group of people now going forward? Will they consider her as somebody that will be vital in growing the party in the various constituencies and especially in that youth constituency and the age cohort that they need to grow in the amongst the African voters? And if they do consider her a valuable asset in that way, keep her on board. But then the question remains is how will she work with the federal chair? How will she work with the various federal structures? Will we see a kind of shift as well with her frustrations of what she exposed as cliques and stuff like that in the party will come to the fore, and then she may feel, I need to rethink. So it all depends on Ms. Ntuli. As much as she says she's not going to leave the party, even if she didn't even if she didn't win, I think the challenge will be how does she see her future in the party and whether the party sees a future in her.
All right, thanks very much, Sanusha Naidoo, political analyst, speaking to us there. A reaction, of course, on the election of a DA leader.